At the heart of it, we're social animals, and the stats certainly back up that we're happier and healthier when we have strong friendships and a supportive community around us. G'day, I'm Debra Caldow. Welcome to the Red Giraffe Solutions Expanding Worlds podcast, where we aim to support you as you help your young person with additional needs plan for their future, a future where they're safe, secure, and live a rewarding and fulfilling life. From around the world, I share stories and I share solutions from people making this possible right now. I'm a parent of a young person with additional needs, so I understand the challenges. Many of the people I've interviewed on this podcast have already helped me design a better future for my daughter, and I hope that they might help you as well to imagine what's possible for your young person. This podcast is made possible by Red Giraffe Solutions, which is a project I'm proud to be part of, supporting families to build a better future for their children. We now have available at Red Giraffe Solutions an online course called Independent Cooking Made Easy. This is a new and unique approach we developed when we realised traditional cooking techniques and recipes were never going to enable our daughter to cook without some support or supervision. It's a safe, simple system that uses no more than 5 ingredients, has no weighing, cutting or chopping, and no lifting of heavy dishes. Each of the 16 recipes in the course includes a step-by-step video of our daughter making the meal, plus a visual recipe card. We developed this for our daughter to solve her challenges with cooking, and every recipe in the course she can and does genuinely cook for herself. You can find a link to the course in this episode's show notes. A few years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, I remember reading something posted online by Spectrum Designs, which said something along the lines of, "When social isolation comes to an end, let's bring an end to social isolation." And because Spectrum Designs is an organisation that supports young people into paid employment, it was pretty clear what they were getting at. In the pandemic, a lot of people experienced social isolation, often for the first time, so there became a wider understanding of the impact that it can have on people. And I know for many people that impact is still there years later. But for people with additional needs, social isolation has been, and still is, a norm in many ways. Of course, one of the other big things that came out of the pandemic was new ways to manage online relationships. I certainly wish I'd had shares in Zoom. In fact, in the last 2 episodes of the podcast, I've been talking to Bob Etzel from iSocial, and one of the things he acknowledges is that the iSocial program evolved into something bigger and better because they moved to using Zoom as the tool to connect people with similar interests. Just to add here as well, if building and managing relationships is something your child finds challenging, then the iSocial program might be worth having a look at. Have a listen to podcast episodes 188 and 189. But getting back to the topic at hand, one of the 4 themes of this podcast has been relationships. At the heart of it, we're social animals, and the stats certainly back up that we're happier and healthier when we have strong friendships and a supportive community around us. However, the reality for our young people is that building and managing relationships can be hard work. There are a number of reasons for that. Some are internal barriers, lack of confidence to go out and meet new people. There's also lack of social skills, which of course is why programs like iSocial exist. Other barriers can include communication issues, because being able to communicate is an essential part of having a relationship with other people. And if you struggle with getting your point across, then it can be much more difficult to build friendships. Then of course there's the external barriers, and these can include geographic location, which is why of course something like Zoom offers so much and can create new options. Many relationships end up being built on proximity. A lot of us still have friends from school, but in my daughter's case, she was at a residential school, so the friends that she had during the week didn't live nearby, so the friendships stayed in the school grounds, if you like. There's also the fact that our young people are often quite dependent on us for things like travelling, which can then limit the social opportunities they have. If we're not able to take them to places they want to go, when they want to go, because, for example, we have work or other commitments that we can't change. And then because young people with additional needs are less likely to be in paid work, that's another social network that isn't usually available to them. And then, of course, there's the external barriers, or maybe a better way of putting that is societal barriers. These can include things like negative attitudes of people around them, which impact on the opportunities that are available, but also when a young person takes up those opportunities, if they don't feel accepted, then they're not likely to want to go back. And there can be other physical barriers as well, particularly when it comes to social events such as not having accessible spaces or lack of thought about how information about events is shared. Although social media and technology seems to be everywhere, there still are some pretty big issues around digital exclusion for people with additional needs. And I suppose another barrier too is us as their family members. It's hard to step back, especially when it comes to something like relationships, which have all sorts of emotional minefields to navigate. And it does come back to this idea that we have to let them go, but we also want them to be safe. We don't want them to be taken advantage of. And if you feel that your young person's vulnerable, then of course you're going to be wary about the people that are around them. I guess the problem is that sometimes we can restrict their access to developing relationships in the belief that we're protecting them. But the problem with protecting people is that they never develop their own resistance or resilience. And we always need to be thinking about what happens when we're no longer around and helping them build the skills so that they can manage situations when we're no longer around to support them. Of course, we all know what the impact of social isolation is. I think there's a lot of truth in the fact they say social isolation is a silent killer, because it has a massive impact on mental health. If you don't see other people, it's hard to feel important, it's hard to feel valued. We all need to have that human connection with other people. Social isolation can also have an impact on physical health. Things like not sleeping very well and not getting out of the house to do any sort of exercise. And if we are socially isolated, we don't get to grow and learn things, find out what we like, find out what we don't like. And that also comes back to our sense of who we are, which impacts on our mental well-being. So how do we go about combating social isolation? A bit like the barriers, there are internal and external ways to do this. With the external barriers, breaking down these requires societal change, specifically changes in the perception that people have of people with additional needs. And getting rid of unhelpful stereotypes would be a great start. While it can sometimes feel we don't have a lot of control over how society sees our children, I think we do, and our children do. This is about modelling behaviour, because what we can see is what we can be. When one person shows the way, that will encourage others to follow. I also think that a lot of this can be driven by our young people getting into paid work. I certainly know that for my daughter, having a job has given her confidence in her own social skills and confidence in herself. Those daily interactions at work are helping her build the skills she can use to connect with others and to build her community. For many of our young people, the main relationships they have are with those who support them or care for them. And while these can no doubt be rewarding, I think as well it's important to help them build social relationships that are not based on reward, but on connection. Because we don't pay our friends. So although people may have activities they go to, and these will enhance their social interactions and make them feel less socially isolated, these relationships are only part of the picture. There still needs to be a focus on expanding young people's social networks, finding them social activities that they enjoy, and helping them connect with people who share their interests. Yes, of course, I know from my own experience that's easier said than done. Believe me, I get that. But through my own research, I found organisations like Stay Up Late. I'll put a link in the show notes to their website. And I'm certain there are others out there, like them, who connect people as equals with common interests. And if nothing else, we can reach out to family and friends to help build a social network. Maybe it will be a temporary one, but the thing is, this is also about evolving as a friend. And that's one of the skills we can help our children build. Maybe you know someone who's willing to be a relationship mentor. I also think as parents we need to be much more open to that dignity of risk I've spoken about before. When I look back to when my daughter was younger, her not doing certain social activities because I worried about her being bullied, I realise now that was the wrong approach, because the benefits may well have outweighed the risks. Of course, when it comes to these activities, there needs to be more willingness to make activities accessible and inclusive. And yes, it's back to good old reasonable adjustments. If there's one thing that I wish for in the world is that people understand what reasonable adjustments are and also understand that they're doing them all the time. And it's not just a case of doing them for our young people. And of course, any discussion around relationships has to address the whole idea of online versus offline relationships. Technology has so much potential to make our lives better. There's no doubt about that. And I know that a lot of young people with additional needs find that their main social connections are through things like gaming. But we have a big challenge when a young person is vulnerable, finding that balance between using technology and being safe. That's a very difficult tightrope to walk. But we can't ignore that technology can open up the world to our young people and prevent them feeling isolated from the rest of the world. I think there's also one other area that we don't talk about enough, and that's about empowering our young people to advocate for themselves. When it comes to something like online safety, there's only so much we can do to protect them, At some point, they have to protect themselves. And they can only do that if they have the tools to do it and we help them build the skills to do it. My idea of relationships is always going to be very different to my daughter's. So there's not a lot of point in me trying to push what I believe onto her. And the more she's able to advocate for herself, the more likelihood there is that she can protect herself and find those friendships that give her what she needs. Even if she doesn't know it, I'm thinking about the future she will have without me. And I know this has to be one where she is not socially isolated. It has to be one where she's part of a community and people care what happens to her. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope that the stories and solutions shared on here help you as you support your young person to create their future. If you know anyone who would find the ideas useful, please share the podcast with them. To support the podcast, please consider finding out more about the Independent Cooking Made Easy online course. It's a safe, simple system that works. There are links to the course in the show notes. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at Debra Caldow. I'd love to have a conversation with you on any of the topics we all care about. Bye for now.